Hello, my name is Conner McGowan. I'm narrating this oral history for the Brevard Historical Commission as part of an internship for the UCF Public History Master's Program. Would you please introduce yourself, Mr. Fonseca?
I'm Aaron Fonseca. I work here in the Creative Lab, and I do all the filming and the cool stuff.
That's fantastic. All right, first we're going to do a bit of introductions and some family history. So would each of you please tell us your name, your graduating class, and where you were born?
Okay, my name is Curbie Wynn. My graduating class was 1957, and I was born on Merritt Island when I moved to Cocoa. I think they said when I was 5 years old, on Alcott Street, right where the same street where the school is. So it was a walking distance of both schools.
And were your parents from Merritt Island?
No, my parents were from Hawthorne. This is a little community out east of Gainesville. So they moved over here years before I was even born. And they were up from a family of 18. I'm number 12.
Well, I'm listening to people. I thought it was 21.
Well, in addition to the 18 that she raised, there were 4 grandkids that she raised along with us.
Oh.
So that made 22 that they raised.
That's fantastic. Miss Hancock?
My name is Mildred Hancock, and I was in the class of 1962 at Monroe High School. And I moved here. I only went to school here 2 years, 11th and 12th grade. I moved here from St. Augustine in 1960. My family did.
Is your family from St. Augustine?
Well, they lived there 2 times, and I was born in South Carolina.
That's fantastic. And do you remember when you were born?
Mm-hmm.
What year were you born in South Carolina?
1943, October. If I live until October 23rd, I'll be 80 years old, thank God.
Congratulations. All right, Ms. McGill.
My name is Rosemary McGill. I was born in Biloxi, Mississippi, February 23rd, 1944. We moved here via North Carolina. My adopted father was in the military. He did a tour of duty in Okinawa, Japan for 3 years. We lived in North Carolina with my grandmother. And when he completed his tour, he was stationed at Patrick Air Force Base. My mother and I joined him here in 1952. I was in 2nd grade when I came here, and I've been here ever since. I'm in the graduating class at Monroe High School of 1962.
My name is James Johnson, 1962 graduate, Monroe High School, born and raised, born in Rockledge. I live on Merritt Island currently. Retired, not retired military, so I'm a military veteran as a combat medic. And this is just always where I want to live. I don't want to live anyplace else.
That's fantastic. Is your family from Brevard?
My mother was born in Jessup, Georgia. She came here as a teenager. My father was born in Blaney, I believe, South Carolina. And he's been here ever since, I guess he was about 9 years old. So both are deceased, of course.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And then I also kind of wanted to go over schooling history. So obviously all of you graduated from Monroe High School, but where you went to before that, like for elementary, and if there was any higher education as well. If you please go. Starting with you, Mr. Wayne.
I guess before we came to Monroe High School, it was Cocoa Junior. Yeah, so I've always gone to that school. And when they built the new school, then they moved up in 1954. In my first year there.
All the way 1st through 12th.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And for you?
You want to know where I attended school?
Absolutely.
Oh, I attended so many schools. My family moved around quite a bit. I attended schools in Aiken County in South Carolina. And then my family moved to St. Augustine. And, well, they lived here in the 30s. And, but I wasn't born then. They moved back to South Carolina in 1943, and that's where I was born. And then in the 50s, the late 50s, my family moved back to St. Augustine, and I attended Monroe High School in St. Augustine until I moved here in 1960 with my family.
Thank you so much.
I came here in 1952, and I started school in Enfield, North Carolina at Emberdine Elementary. By the time I got to second grade, my father had been stationed at Patrick, and they removed me. Enrolled me at Monroe High School. That was in 1952. And of course, I graduated from that school in 1962. That's about it. That's the only schools. Monroe became a high school when I was at the age of 4. In 1948, I was born in 44, and it became a high school in 48, and I entered it in 1952. That's my alma mater. I love it. It's in my bones.
And your higher education?
I attended Bethune-Cookman College, and we had a historical black school. Before I went to Bethune-Cookman was Carver Junior College. It was one of those that's in the integrated pattern of Monroe High School. When we got the first junior college, of course, we were still under Jim Crow segregation. So the facility was held at night in the evening at Monroe High, and that was Carver Junior College. I attended that. After that, we integrated, and when they closed Carver, we integrated Carver into Brevard Community College. And I was there for only about 9 months when I left and attended Bethune-Cookman College in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Fantastic.
We took similar paths. I was attending Monroe Elementary. It was still Monroe, but it was Monroe Elementary. Graduated from Monroe High. Went to class at Carver Junior College, which they had the classes that night. And ironically, I believe we were the first black students to attend Brevard Junior College. I was there. I received my AA from there. Went into the military. Came back. Worked for TWA on the Space Center. Somehow I got involved in correction. And I went back. I graduated from Florida A&M. I took some graduate classes, and it wasn't UCF then. I think it was FTU. I believe that's what it was.
It was.
And I ended up after I ended up going to work for only it's supposed to have been just a short stint, just for something to do. I went to work for the Florida Department of Corrections, and unfortunately I stayed up. Well, fortunately I stayed up 30 and a half years. And moved back to Cocoa after I finished in the Department of Corrections.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. So many of you went to elementary school in the original Monroe building. So I wanted to ask how Monroe Elementary and Monroe High School were separated out and distinguished in that building.
I tell you, it was a fantastic 2 decades of learning. We had super teachers who, and they were so small, they was able to give us much closer attention than they have today. I believe most of the graduates will attest that we are who we are today as a result of those 12 years at Monroe High School.
Fantastic.
And it didn't have a whole lot of room, so they had a big auditorium, and 2 or 3 classes was in that auditorium. Yeah. So you can imagine how difficult it may have been to try to learn 3 classes in the auditorium, but we got through it. We did.
And because the facility was small and the enrollment was gaining, it was strengthening, increasing, what they did, we had what we call split sessions. And adjacent to the main building that's still there now on site, adjacent to it was a little row of portables. It was like portables. And because the younger children, the elementary children, were in such large numbers, many of them were what they still call war babies. But because they were so large in numbers, they did split sessions. You would have one group that would go from 8 in the morning to 12 noon. And the next group, which I was always in, went from 12 to 4. There was something spiritual about that institution. And when Curbie and James and I think about it, our elementary days was the foundation. We had teachers who were concerned about us and would come to your parents' home to check on you and to have a conference with mom and dad on your progress, whether it was good or bad. We did things that was it was cultural. The historical black schools was a culture that only we can explain. And those men and women in that school taught us well. But not only did they teach us how to read, write, and think, they made us proud of who we were. Kinky hair and all, they made us proud of who we were. I remember on one occasion, Hibbert had a person talk, and they said we had kinky hair, flat nose, and thick lips. And they were right. We do have kinky hair, flat noses, and thick lips. And I like me. They taught us to like ourselves, but we became the people we are morally. But the other thing that was in the school with us, besides our teachers who were nurturers, they were parents to us and educators. But we had God in the public school. We didn't sharpen a pencil or open a book until we had prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag every morning. And when we sat at lunch, before we opened a carton of milk or broke off a piece of bread, we had to fold our hand, and thank the Lord for our daily bread. They taught us.
And our parents were supportive of what
Yes.
they did. For instance, myself, we rode the school bus all the way down to, I forget the name of the town now, but beyond Rockledge. They had one, Bonaventure. They had one school bus, one school bus. We'll go to Bonaventure first, well, they pick us up first. We'll go to Bonaventure, go to West Cocoa, go to Sharps, Cedar Point, and Merritt Island. So now you're talking about busing. You know, they can't tell me about busing. You know. But the bottom line, our parents told us, told me and my sister, of course, once you get on that school bus with Reverend Hooks, there was a school bus driver, and he'd go down River Road.
20 miles an hour.
Almost fall asleep. I don't know why he didn't have an
From
accident.
here to Miami, 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, but they told us one thing. When you get on that school bus, Reverend Hooks is your parent.
That's right.
When you get to Monroe High, those teachers are your parents. Now, when you get back home, you belong to us. It wasn't all of this chaos we have now going on in the school system, and especially as far as discipline.
And
that discipline started early.
Our parents, even with their broken English and Southern dialect, respected the teacher and the principal. They didn't call Mr. Morse, Principal Morse, they called him Fessor Morse. And he was our guardian. We had respect.
And back then, if the teacher had something that she wanted to discipline you about, or she wanted to let your parents know, they wrote a note. And you had to carry that note, even if it was for you or against you. And you carried it to your parents because the parents had let us know that the teacher is in charge of you when you get to school. And we had paddling back then that day.
Oh, yes.
I went to school here in 1960 in the 11th grade. But I didn't really walk down the aisle with them. I was in their class, but I got a little sassy, as the old people used to say. And I dropped out just before I graduated, but I had all my credits to graduate. And thank God for Principal Johnson. After that, well, he offered me to come back to school and graduate with the class behind me. And of course, I was thinking I was a young lady then, I didn't have to do that, so I didn't do it. But years later, when I moved to Tallahassee, and my husband wanted me to graduate from school, and we contacted Principal Johnson. I'm telling a story that they had probably never heard, but I need to say it because he was so concerned. And my teachers, I never will forget. Mr. Miller, William, but his name was William, but they called him Sonny. He thought a lot of me. Margaret Miller, another one that thought a lot of me. And they called me and tried to get me to come back and walk down the aisle with them, but I didn't. I refused. Then years later, when I moved to Tallahassee and was with my husband and one child, we contacted Principal Johnson about me graduating. And we went to the, well, my husband did, he went to the state school board, you know, and told my story to them there. And they contacted Monroe High School, and Mr. Johnson was the principal then. And he told them that I had all the credits I needed to graduate. So they gave me an option to attend a night class just for the sake of attending it. And I would be able to graduate and not have to take a GED or anything like that. So that's how I got. But I paid a price. I was young, and I came out okay, I think, for a person that was poor and disadvantaged, and I appreciated what those teachers did for me. They tried their best to encourage me to come back to school.
We were so blessed.
And I really was blessed. So I eventually got a divorce and moved back here to Cocoa. And I started working at Kennedy Space Center, and I worked there for almost 30 years. And here I am today.
There are two people that they mentioned. Professor Moss. But don't think.
I wasn't here under him. I was not here under him.
Oh no, Professor B.A. Morris, but the principal at the time. And you mentioned about what we had to do before class started at lunchtime. I think it was Wednesday.
Every Wednesday was chapel.
Chapel day. And and one of the things that he did that I remember, I learned and I remember and I retain even until this day. The scripture that he read was the 25th chapter of Matthew.
That's right. Which was the
Then
virgin.
took the virgin,
10 virgins.
took their lamps, went forth to meet the bridegroom, 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. I remember that to this day.
Right.
I can repeat the whole thing because of him. And the other one was Dave Johnson, principal. Well, before he became principal, he was a basketball coach. He was a basketball coach. And there were 2 or 3 of us, we was in the 7th, 8th, 9th grade or something like that. And we decided we wanted to go play basketball. Well, I mean, we were too young to go on the team, but he took us in anyway. He let us travel with the team. You know, when they went on the tournaments, he took us. We were young. We didn't get to play with the big boys, but because of him, Lebo Wilson, Robert Aaron, yeah. So he took us in under his wings.
I would like to say also, she spoke about religion and everything. I remember in a lot of the schools that I was in, before you started your classes, I don't remember whether it was every day or just at certain times, we had to go out and pledge allegiance to the flag. We had to say the Lord's Prayer, and I remember the Lord's Prayer in the 23rd Psalm today because I learned it in school.
In school.
And I thank them for that.
And they were very patriotic because we sang a lot of patriotic songs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God bless America.
Yeah.
My country is the sweet land of liberty, and we were in bondage under Jim Crow,
But we still
but we were
patriotic.
still pledging.
Yeah.
We loved our country. We were taught to love our country and the people in it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah. No, I wanted to ask, because y'all talked about how the parents supported your education by trusting the teachers and like trusting what they said. Were there any other ways that the parents supported Monroe School and your education?
Well, one was with discipline.
That's where it started.
One was with discipline.
And that started at home.
That's right. Listen, we didn't say yeah or no. We said yes,
Yeah,
sir,
sure.
and yes, ma'am. No, sir, and no, ma'am. We said please and thank you. When we wanted the attention of a teacher or an elder, we would say, excuse me, please, and they would direct us to wait our turn, and we were patient. That's the way we were taught in our culture. When it came, we were disciplined at home. My high school principal, Mr. B.A. Morris, had in his office a paddle, a collegiate board. And the inscription on that paddle was, if you apply the Board of Education to the seat of knowledge, you get a better student every time. He taught us when we would go to that chapel. Wednesday that he was talking about was midweek chapel. The boys had to wear a tie. We dressed up like we were going to church. Can you imagine going there to have church at school to talk about God and your country and to do oratoricals? But we would go, and one thing Curbie hit on it. One of the things he always taught us was about the 10 virgins, 5 wise and 5 foolish. And the oil in the lamp was the oil education going in. He's telling us, while you're at Monroe, fill your lamp with the oil to go out. When we were going out, after we got an education under Jim Crow segregation, we didn't have the opportunity to go work at the bank, to go work at the Space Center. That came after civil rights in 1963 with Lyndon Baines Johnson, but during our days. But Mr. Morris also taught us something, and Curbie, you all will remember this. Every week in midweek chapel, he would end telling us the story about 2 little boys, Tommy Kent and Johnny Dew. Now, Johnny Dew was always there. He brushed his coat and combed his hair. He never said, oh, I forgot. No. He was a Johnny on the spot. But Tommy Kent just wouldn't try. He let the golden hours pass him by. Where do you think he is today? Why, he only managed a 3rd-rate pay. Tell me now, which would be you, Tommy Kent or Johnny Dew? Never say, oh, I forgot. No. You be a Johnny on the spot. Principal Morse let us know that fruit falls from the tree by which it is born. And we were at Monroe High School to get a good education, to know how to conduct ourselves in life, to know how to speak, to know how to sit at the Queen's table and know that that little dish there with water in it was not for sipping, but for finger dipping. We learn etiquette. We learn about God. We learn about our country, and we learn about ourselves. That's what he was talking about. Those teachers were, let me tell you, what changed things was integration, because now you got a paddle. He couldn't paddle those white kids if he was in their environment. But then our parents would even draw up for a white parent to lay hand on us because of Jim Crow segregation. So the paddle was put aside. Then you had the ideology of other people where our country was created around our religion, Christianity. Now you take God out. I learned this, and I heard this saying, our children today have just been neglected. The teacher is afraid of the principal. The principal is afraid of the superintendent. The superintendent is afraid of the school board. The school board is afraid of the parent. And children ain't scared of nobody. We've lost them. But this group of us, we have a story to tell under historical black high schools under Jim Crow segregation. And we came out all right. And all of us are talking about the same things we learned at Monroe High School amongst those teachers.
Fantastic. Now, I wanted to ask, you mentioned that banks and NASA wasn't an option for employment before the success of the civil rights movement. So I wanted to ask what kind of lives and careers you felt Monroe prepared you for before the success of civil rights?
To teach. That was the vocation. You could go and there were other vocations. You had what was called vocational schools. And those vocational schools taught you how to sew, how to cook, how to work agriculture, to work cattle, husbandry. It taught those things. In our schools, we have, for the girls, what was called the NHA, New Homemakers of America. The boys had what was called FFA, Future Farmers of America, because we lived in a culture of agriculture. That was the environment. By the time we were graduating, we couldn't go and get a job at Barnett Bank. So what you would do, the boys would either go in the military, because they had the draft back then. They would go in the military, go to school to be a barber. The girls could go to school to be a beautician or to teach. And we had historical black schools, but those schools didn't have the same accreditation. Our teachers went into schools if they had an 8th grade education, because back then for them, that's as far as school went. When you hear people say my mother only had an 8th grade education, that was equivalent to a 12th grade, because schools did not allow them that. They had to go work agriculture, and they had to go work domestics. That's how they earn a living. So that was what we were introduced to. I thought, you know what I thought I wanted to be when I was in high school? I wanted to work at the 10-cent store, the 5 and dime, Neisner's downtown with all that pretty stuff. And we could get those jobs. Those were for white ladies. Our parents was working for those white women. And then we would go off to college. Our teachers they didn't even get degrees the same as the white teachers. They got what was called normal degrees. If you look at the historical black colleges, they are agriculture and mechanical. Florida A&M Florida Agriculture and Mechanical. Tuskegee was an institute of learning. There was a college here in Florida called Florida Normal. I mean, you got a normal. Your degree was not the same as those that came out of the University of Florida. We couldn't go to those schools under Jim Crow segregation. So Mr. Morris was one of those instruments who argued with the school board and with the Board of Regents in Tallahassee. Why can't my teachers, if they've been certified, they weren't accredited, they were certified by the state, they could only teach in black schools because they didn't have the credentials. So they got what was called through certification a normal degree. They couldn't make the same kind of money that their white counterpart made because those women came out of Florida State, University of Florida. And the only time that our teachers could advance, they had to go up north. Dr. Johnson, my literature teacher, went to Michigan at Ann Arbor every summer. And after about 4 or 5 years, he acquired his doctorate. But he couldn't use it here in a white school or white university. He came right back to Monroe High School, teaching with a doctorate degree, making the same level. So that's what Jim Crow segregation did to us. But out of all of that, it's an old saying when you're exercising, no pain, no gain. We went through pain and didn't know it was pain. It was a way of life with us, but we came out whole. Now, through that institution that we're talking about now, and the stories that we're telling, we got some smart folk. Dick Blake, who came out of that institution, became the first black principal at Cocoa High School, and now they've got a park named after him. They've got a stadium named after him. That's, yeah, Jolie Smith got a beautiful edifice, a recreation center. So we were that old guava tree. We did all right, but it all came through our parents and our teachers and the community that we lived in.
And you know, even though everybody who graduated from Monroe didn't go on to college, but at Monroe they gave you a basic
Yes.
education, reading, writing.
And arithmetic.
You can do that.
How
Nowadays,
they-
a lot of kids, they graduate, they can't even read on the eighth
They
grade
can't read.
level. But
Yeah.
you got that. Because when I, in my career afterwards, I went to work for Florida Power and Light.
In South Carolina, I'm sorry.
One of the first black person that worked at FPL at the time. But I was there until I retired with a high school education. And I even trained some of the engineers that they hired to go into the department that they had started that I was on, with that basic high school education that I got from Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say, when I was growing up in South Carolina, I went to what you probably have heard called the one classroom school.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my sister and my brother, there were 8 in my family, but 3 of us kind of grew up together. We was close in age. We walked. It's cold in South Carolina. We walked 3 miles to get to that one classroom school. And it would be so cold. My father would give my brother some little sticks that would light very easily and some matches. And halfway there, we were so cold, our hand and feet. He would have my brother, because he was older than us, to make a fire and get us warm enough to make it to school. And when we got to that one classroom school, the teacher had a heater in there that was almost red hot. And we'd be so cold, we'd try to get to it and she'd push us back to keep us from getting, you know, whatever you get when you get cold like that. And they had oatmeal for us to eat and bananas. I will never forget that. I don't care how old I get, I don't think I'll ever forget it. And we went to that school many years. And what was so sad, in the afternoon, we had to walk back those 3 miles. And the school bus would come along, and the kids, they were all white. We could not ride that bus. And we didn't understand why we couldn't ride it, but we accepted the fact because our parents just told us, go ahead, walk. And it's so surprising to me now that we thought enough of education, of getting that education, that we walked. And they would pass us and throw things out the window at us. That yellow school bus. And what was so sad when I was getting ready to enter first grade in South Carolina, I don't know about here, you had to be 6 years old to go to first grade, but my parents knew the teacher real well. They let them send me to school when I was only 4. But I just went because they didn't want to leave me at home. So I just went there. But when I got 6 years old, I was coming up to 6 years old, I was going to have to start public school, which we had come to a public school then. And because I was so fair, even your own brothers and sisters sometimes can be cruel to you. They would tell me, see that bus? See that bus? You're going to have to ride that bus when you start school next year. And I would just boo-hoo cry because I didn't want to leave my brothers and sisters and ride that bus with all of the white children. But that's what they led me to believe. And I would cry so much, and my mom finally found out about it, and she really fussed them out. So we were living very close to the public school, and I was so happy the first day of school that I didn't have to ride the bus. I walked to school, and that was horrible. That, but I wanted to go to school.
When she first came to Monroe, like I said, we wanted Jim Crow segregation. We knew each other. Everybody knew everybody in the community. And when she came to Monroe, we looked at her strange. And we began to whisper, they got a white girl coming here. Why they sent that white girl over here? She's supposed to be a cocoa. We thought she was white because she had light skin and had freckles. We weren't used to that. I mean, we had black skin. We didn't have freckles. And but she blended in quite well. The other thing I wanted to say about education and what it did for us, and I always go back to Mr. Morse. He would tell us, a tree bears its own fruit. You don't go to an apple tree looking for oranges. You don't go to a watermelon patch looking for grapefruit. You don't go to a vineyard looking for guavas. And you don't come to Monroe High School looking for a bunch of nuts. We produce students. And when it really hit me, I think the fact that we came out of those two cultures, from segregation to integration, when we got into integration, we saw the white kids, and it seemed we were so culturally different. And we were accustomed to white folk, but to intermingle was strange for us. And it was strange for them. But it wasn't until I got into the workforce did I realize how smart I was. We were proud when we entered Mr. Robert Jones' chemistry class and had to learn the periodic table of elements and its equivalents. We were proud when we could explain the molecular value of a cell. We knew what chlorophyll was. Yet we were in a chemistry class where we had one Bunsen burner and one microscope and a few specimens, and the only other article we had was the mortar and a crucible. But we learned chemistry. It was when I got into the workforce with white children that I realized I'm smart, because I knew the 8 parts of speech. First thing we learned in elementary school, the 8 parts of speech. I knew what an interrogative was. I knew we had teachers that could take us in an English class, Miss Blake, and in an afternoon could teach you to diagram a compound complex sentence. We did well on SATs. We didn't know we were that smart. But when we sit here now and we're in our 70s and 80s and reflect on that, we see the value of what we got in that system.
It all started at that little school.
That one little bitty school.
I used to tell, during my class, I used to talk to a bunch of, especially black inmates. And, and I would tell them, with all that stuff we went through, trials and tribulation and all that stuff, we was born into it. So to us at that point, it wasn't no big deal. That's just where it was. But I used to tell, especially young inmates, and we did. We lost a whole lot doing integration.
Yeah,
we lost a whole lot of culture.
But it had to be.
But it had to be. It had to be. And but the younger kids now, they didn't realize it. So I just be very candid with them. I say, you think you got it hard, but you couldn't live in the age where I couldn't go to the bathroom if it had color, if it had white on it. It had to be colored. We went through all of these rough patches and stuff. And the main thing I tell them is that we have come a heck of a long ways. There's still a long ways to come. But I can appreciate how far we have come because I was doing that part, you know, but you was born into this part, you know, so it's no big deal to you. So, you know, it's you know, we've come, I'm so proud of that school.
Oh, absolutely,
That
absolutely.
taught us, you know, I can never, and my mother used to say, spare the rod, spoil the child. And
They didn't kill us.
No, they didn't. And
made us wish we was dead, but they didn't kill us.
it wasn't abuse, it was discipline.
Mm-hmm.
It was discipline. And I never forget some of the, she'll have us to go get the switch. Be beating the son, I want you to know this hurt me worse than it hurt you. I couldn't get that concept. You know, I couldn't get that concept. But as you grow older, I appreciate every whooping that I got now from there. So I, you know, putting things in context, it's I know even in you guys, you know, you're pretty young, and I know it's hard for some of it to believe. But I mean, we actually lived through it, but we survived.
It was a good time.
We survived.
And you hear him talk about how proud they are of Monroe. There are some kids who graduated from school recently. They don't know their school song.
They don't.
Oh, yeah.
We can still sing Monroe
We
High
still
School.
sing our,
We can still sing right
days
there.
are coming fast, when we shall say it last.
Yeah.
Dear old Monroe, how we love
Do you know your school song?
you, we shall not
I
forget.
honestly
Don't put it on the spot like that.
No,
He don't
it's
care.
very different education. Like that's important. I'm very excited to talk about school pride in just a second.
But
I just
we can
wanted-
sing that song right now.
I just wanted to actually circle back. When you mentioned that the teachers provided oatmeal at their house, do you know how they established that breakfast program in South Carolina?
I don't know, as far as I can talk to my older siblings, I think the state or some other county that we lived in supplied it.
No, it's just I know that
Yeah.
that's been like important over the decades, establishing free breakfasts for students. So I was curious about that.
Well, you know what, when it came to food, one of the things we learned too, and I'm gonna tell you, we learned chemistry, but the best chemist in the world was the cooks in the kitchen. We had 5 or 6 black women whose hands knew the recipe. You would be sitting in your English lit class and you smell the sweet savors coming from that kitchen. Peach cobbler, fresh cornbread. We had a garden where, and they bought a wash machine to put in the kitchen there so that Miss Brown and those could take those greens that Mr. Campbell had in the garden, clean them up, put them in that wash machine, get them all clean. We had fresh vegetables. The county would send down all commodity meat. It was a pork in a can, and they would take it and chop it up. She put carrots and peas and rice and some spices in there, and it was called Texas hash. When we got the menu and looked at it for that week, ooh, I'm gonna save my money, I wanna eat on this day. 30 cents for a meal. Food was cooked by our mothers in that kitchen. And it was prepared, much of it, from the fresh garden. We had a cow at Monroe High School, Betsy Monroe.
Do you know how that cow got to Monroe?
I don't know how she got that, but I know Mr. Campbell didn't want you to mess with her.
Mr. Campbell, he had a Ford Fairlane, a blue Ford Fairlane. He took the back seat out of his car, went to Tallahassee,
Okay.
put that cow in his car and brought it back to Monroe.
See, I didn't know that.
That's
He did.
This is fantastic. Now, for the garden and the kitchen, you mentioned that it was mothers. Was it like staffed through volunteering, or was it like a parent
No, they
organization?
got paid for it. They were paid to cook. We didn't have, these kids miss it because we got the best meals some of the students got was at school. Woodrow J. Wilson would come down, he was superintendent of school board, and they would come down to, they were in Titusville, that's where the county seat is, but they would come and meet the teachers from, people from Melbourne, and the people from Titusville would meet centrally. And he would have his meeting. they would go to a restaurant because they were all white people that would come down to assess the school. And they would go to a restaurant supposedly called Carl Sands Dining Room. Y'all remember old Carl Sands? That's where they would go. They had black cooks in there. But Woodrow J. Wilson says, no, call Benjamin. For a long time, I didn't like that he called Mr. Morse Benjamin, but that's what he called him. And he says, call Benjamin, we'll make arrangements to eat at Monroe. You know why? They had some black cooks in there, and they would take, that was a space, a room, which was our home economics room, that we would clear. Tables would be set, and the cooks from the kitchen would bring them. We knew they were eating good because they got good cornbread, they got good peach cobbler, sometimes apple pie, mulberry doobies. Ooh-wee. Everything was cooked, fresh. Nothing came in. The only thing came in processed was that old commodity meat, and she made Texas hash out of it.
Now, were any students involved in the gardening?
Oh yeah, that's what the Future Farmers of America was.
Yeah.
That's
Very
the
much love to
agriculture.
hear more about that. Was there any classes or was it?
Yeah, it was classes, regular classes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Somebody donated some land out of,
Yeah,
off of the past Clear, it was past Clear Lake.
yeah.
And we had a farm out there, a little small farm that somebody
And they
donated.
had one right, almost across from where Donald Glenn and those lived.
Mm-hmm.
We used to walk there to one of the classes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, you know,
yeah,
you used to,
yeah,
you had to go out there and work the farm.
So it was classes, was
Yeah.
there, like,
You know what, we learned something regardless of what they was teaching. We learned something from the teachers, from every activity we had.
That's right.
Every activity
That's
we
right.
had. Boy, Mr. Campbell, that was the agricultural
He's an
teacher.
ag teacher, yeah.
You know, if I had to match who could hit harder with a paddle, Mr. Campbell had to be number one on that list. You know, and but it's just
Well, I
it
don't
was just
know,
so
James.
different. It was just so different back then.
Mr. Morris, when
It
you
was
put that
hard. It was
paddle on-
hard. It was hard. It was rough, but we
Mr.
survived.
Campbell. You talking about Mr. Campbell's
Oh, yeah.
paddle?
Yeah.
Let me tell you, when
Yeah.
Mr. Morris put it on that,
Oh, Mr.
we-
Morris was- yeah,
you
yeah.
saw dust and detergent come from y'all butts.
When they say don't go to the principal
You put
office,
that
you
paddle
know
on.
what's coming.
And we love those men, let me tell you, to this day, we
We
love them.
love them for what they made us out to be.
Mhm.
You know, yeah.
Oh, you all missed out. You all, now I'm gonna tell you where you white males should have been in a black school. You would have gotten stuff, let me tell you, that you would, these are our bragging rights, our education. All of the morals and the values and the principles that they taught us, the respect, how to respect other people, how to love on other folk, even if they don't love you back. We were taught that. We didn't know how to hate. We resented white folk, but we didn't know how to hate. Because those teachers who was in the classroom teaching us to read, write, and think was teaching us how also to love our fellow man and our country.
that's absolutely incredible. I don't want to get too focused on this, but I am very curious on what you learned to grow in the Future Farmers of America.
Oh,
Yeah.
okra, tomatoes, which was easy. You name it, we.
Them collard greens, y'all know
Oh,
how
yeah,
to get them greens.
greens.
And
Corn,
not only-
watermelon.
Not only vegetables and stuff, but we were responsible for taking care of the school lawn.
Ooh,
The
yes.
school board didn't provide lawn care. We did that through the ag department. Yeah,
I wish you could have seen our campus. Pristine. Grass looked like God took a brush and painted it. And Mr. Campbell, well, you didn't walk on it. You didn't see a piece of paper on our campus. It was so clean and pristine. And when classes changed, when the bell rang for the next class, you got in a single file and you didn't say a word. Somebody coming this way would say, Mr. Morris is on call. And we would walk. We had decorum. The school campus was so pretty and clean, but that was coming from the agriculture department, Mr. Campbell.
I said, I don't know where he got
And
it from.
Ernest.
He used to go somewhere and get chicken manure. That's what he.
Cocoa feed and seed, that's where
He
he
used to go
got
out
it
there
from.
and he tells us, now, you can't be a good agriculture teacher or farmer unless you take some of this and squish it in his hand.
Yeah.
They count the chicken manure. And that's what he fertilized the yard with.
You know, let me say something on a personal note also. I believe you guys was at these, well, you've been to McGill Academy. I am so thankful for Mr. Cole in that school because there was talk of them tearing it down. I've always said, and this is just so personal, that house that I was raised in, a little 3-bedroom house, got 10 kids, in Rockledge, it still sits there today on US 1. It's a call out now. But I've always said those are two buildings I would never want to see torn down. That house and that building, Monroe, it's which is McGill Academy now. You know, those two outfits meant the world to me.
Yeah.
And at my age right now, it still does. And I think a lot of the graduates, our attendees from Monroe feel the same way.
Very glad that it's still used.
I've got to apologize to you all. Every time I get a chance to talk about my experiences from then back now, I get a nervous condition and I just can't stop. So that's why I keep going on.
We wouldn't want to.
I think it's doing me good to let it out. So now I'm not going to be judged for letting it out or
Absolutely
whatever,
not.
because we had to keep all that stuff in us for so long. And so I wanted to apologize for having to go out so regularly.
See, it's a passion when we talk about this history, because we lived it.
My children think when I said, turn that off, I don't want to watch that, you know, and they would watch Roots and that kind of stuff. I said, I don't want to watch that, I don't want to watch that. And they said,
It takes you back
Mama,
to
why
the
you?
pain.
I said, they said, Mama, that's just a movie.
No.
I said, no, that's reality. I lived through it. They just can't believe that.
And see, you guys, what you're doing, recording and asking us these questions, we're in our 80s, 70s and 80s. So we know we're walking toward our midnight. And the stories and experiences that we had, we tell. But you guys are the ones that's gonna tell that story for us. And that goes back to history. They have now, and I don't know what's wrong with our government, they are afraid of the 1716 project. Tell that story. We didn't come over on the Mayflower. Our people came on in the belly of slave ships. We were taught in elementary school that the Mayflower sailed, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered America. We were told that the immigrants came over on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. They didn't tell you about Lord Legionnaire. They didn't tell you about the Catilda, which is now in the bottom of the bay at Mobile, Alabama, the last slave ship. Why do you hide that history? We're okay, we're still here, but tell the history. That's where you guys will come in. And I appreciate you all taking the time to allow the four of us express an experience in a black institution with black parents, with black teachers, with black cooks, and with black folk in the community caring for us. Because when we were coming along, the phoenix of the community was Monroe High School and the local churches. That's what we grew up with.
And as a note for the interview, you're talking about the 1619 project.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask, we've kind of danced around this, I wanted to ask what kind of black history you were taught at Monroe.
None. We were taught this history that the Board of Regents and the schools under Jim Crow allowed. It was painted with a pretty picture. Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. that the immigrants came over on what was the ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. We would talk basic, no more about our culture. It wasn't until civil rights that we began, because we didn't know about us. We know our people were slaves. I'm gonna tell you a story quickly about two little girls. These two little girls, they had two other sisters. This was in a place called McComb, Mississippi. And their mother and their father lived on a plantation in sharecroppers. But when the season of crops was over, the father would work the railroad. These two little girls was playing in a pear tree. And their mother was leaving this plantation because the plantation, during those days, there was a law. It was not a written law, but it was one understood under Jim Crow segregation called the Paramour Rights. Paramour Rights allowed that white owner or of that plantation to go and have who he wanted. That's how our race got mixed up with the white race. So these two little girls was in this pear tree. Their mother was preparing to leave that plantation to go to another to get away from this plantation owner. He came, and when he came, he approached the mother. She refused. This woman was a stoic woman, refusing to have you touch my body. And you didn't sass a white man, girl, gal, that's what they were called. But she did. She put both fists in her hips and said, "Over my dead body." And they began to fight. When she fought this white man, she wore him down. The children saw this white man fighting with this lady. They ran to their mother, each little girl on either side of him. When he went to his truck, he got a shotgun, came back, and boom, blew her brains out. Here these two little girls standing on the side of them, and they got their mother's blood and brain matter stuck in their head. One was 8 years old, and the other one was 12. They scared them. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Mississippi, but you don't go into a Mississippi swamp and come out unless you're an old Cajun or you're an old Mississippian that know how to navigate. These two little girls went in this Mississippi swamp, stayed 2 nights. The two older girls who was working on another plantation says, "I'm not leaving." The people say, "We gotta get y'all out of here." The two older girls says, "We're not leaving without our sister." So they thought, they're out in the swamp. I know where they are. So these white people got the lanterns and went out with the two girls and start calling these two little girls' names. By and by, here they come. Dirty, wet, scared to death, shocked, just totally terrorized. They got those girls, cleaned them up, put them on a buckboard, and took them to this town called Biloxi. Well, fast forward this story. 10 years later, now the 8-year-old is 18. The 12-year-old is 22. It was February 20, a cold morning, February 23rd, 1944. The 8-year-old girl who was 18 had a baby, 9-pound baby girl. That 9-pound baby girl was me. That little 8-year-old girl was my mother. The woman that we never saw again, that man killed, was my grandmother. These are stories that bind us together. These are stories that nobody wants to hear about under Jim Crow, what we had to go through. So when this is what bothers her. When we tell our stories, we got stories to tell. They can't be hidden. You gotta tell the story. And so it's not about just education. It's about our total being. All 4 of us here has something that touched us in our upbringing. But where we go back and find our foundation is right here, Monroe High School. And these men and women that you'll see in this book that taught us, that guided us and made us who we are. And yet we still don't hate. This is why I got a little full when the lady that was in here telling about she's a Jew, and we were talking about the Holocaust. I got full over the Holocaust. That's painful, but these are stories that need to be told. And this is why when I told my story to the students on the camp, Eastern Florida State campus, those football players, this is why they were saying, Miss McGill, Miss McGill. They never heard the story. You have to tell your children the story. You write it, you film it, you go and tell somebody else about it, and do it all over again in another community. And then we'll have American history. You cannot deny the Native Americans and even those immigrants that are coming to this country. God made this land and it's big enough for all of us. I remember when I was in the March on Washington, next to me were 3 singers, Peter, Paul, and Mary, folk singers. And they started out with this song, if I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening all over this land. I'd hammer about the love between my brothers and my sisters all over this land. You all have to tell the story.
I worked with a lady at Kennedy Space in a long time. She was a Caucasian lady, and I was reading a book one day by Bessie Smith. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She was a blues singer. And she says, "What are you reading, Mildred?" So I started telling her about it. And when I told her about it, and then we got into other conversations about the way we grew up and the way we were treated and whatever. And she finished and she cried. I said, "What are you crying for?" She said, "I don't understand why you all are not any more bitter than you are with the stories you're telling me that happened to you." I said, "Well, it does us no good. And that's why we're not as bitter."
Yeah, you
there
can't
are
be
some
bitter.
who is bitter.
Cry it out, talk it out. You can't
And
be
I
bitter.
don't know if you all remember how Bessie Smith died. Well, I'll just tell you, she was in, I want to say maybe South Carolina, one of the southern states. And she was a reporter, and they had a car accident at the time. And back during that time, an ambulance, an emergency vehicle would not transport black people. And the black undertakers would usually come out and take them to wherever they had to go. And when the white ambulance came, they picked up the white people that were in the other car, but they left Bessie out there. And when the black undertaker got the word, it was so late, they came to get her, and she died. She never made it. That's how I have a record at my house of Bessie Smith right now. It was made by a white lady in Alabama that made figurines and out of pecan shells. I don't know if you're All My Children, I think is the name of it. I can't find any anymore, but one of the Caucasian ladies that I worked with gave me this Bessie Smith figurine. There used to be a shop right up on US 1 North that sold it, and she saw it in there one day, and she told me about it. And I said, "How much does it cost?" She said, "It's $100 and some, Mildred." I said, "I can't afford that. I'm not going to afford that." So she was leaving Kennedy Space Center, and she came to me and said, "Mildred, I got a gift for you." I said, "Well, you getting a gift for me? I should be getting one for you. You're the one leaving." And she says, "I know that you wanted it." And she gave me that figurine, and it was retired when she gave. I says, "Why did you spend this money for this?" She said, "I wanted you to have it." She says, "And I didn't spend $100 and some. I spent $75 because they retired it and they reduced the price on it, so I got it for you today." I almost cried. Well, I did cry, but for her to think that much of it, and then I still have that figurine today, and I have a certificate for it. But it just goes to show you, I hate to tell these things in front of this child here, because
My children know stories.
I guess they do, but
They could tell you some stories. And
it's still happening sometimes. When I go in the grocery store, and I'm standing in the line, and there's a line of people, and I see this Caucasian person just keep easing up, and they get in front of me, and I just stand there. And I had a classmate of mine that was visiting me in St. Augustine one day, and that happened, and I said, I'm not letting this go. He says, why are you gonna let her make your day? Because the cashier knew that she was not next in line, but she accepted her next. And she knew that she was not next in line, but yet she stood in front of us. And I says, I gotta say something. I'm gonna talk to the supervisor. He says, don't let her make your day. That's what she's trying to do. And I learned a lesson that day. Just let it go. But we still have, I mean, this is happening now.
And contrary to that, I was in line at Walmart. I had my little products in there, and there was this white couple in front of me. And the gentleman, he says, let me help you with this. Because I'm an invalid, I was in a little scooter chair, and he took my groceries out and put on there. There was another gentleman behind me. So when they got all my food products on there, and I took out my little debit card to pay for it, there was a gentleman behind me. He said, no, I got this. And I said, no, I'm okay. He says, that's your card. I'm gonna spend mine. He said, just pay it forward. See, this is where we get these Karens from that she's talking about. But they're not all like, it's not like that. There has been a change. And this is why I say we have to tell the stories fully, because you can see the pain and the joy. That man, I had $40 worth of product. To me, they were angels. And I thought, why did they do that? But there are other instances when I have been in the store where a person would say, let me help you with that, would get milk out of the box for me, or would get something and say, do you need this? Or a loaf of bread where I can't reach it. So people are different. In your passion, now you're not gonna change the world, but this is where storytelling comes in, where you can see both sides of it. Under Jim Crow segregation, you couldn't see that because it wasn't allowed. Now we can express it through education and an institution like Monroe High School.
Listen, it's going to be very difficult, so I don't want to push anyone, but any other like stories and experiences of
we
white
tell them.
violence or gendered violence in Brevard County that you remember.
Any what?
I was
Speak
curious.
up, Conner.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Sorry about that. I was curious about any other experiences of white violence or white gendered violence.
You know, personally, born and raised right here, even during segregation, and of course, like I said again, we was born into it. This part of the country, or this part of Florida, I experienced very little.
You're right, Jimmy.
I really did. I've experienced very little. Nothing like what we got now. Goes on now, But back in those days, knock on wood. But I experienced very little.
But he's right. It was a system, but the people knew each other. White folk knew. My mother would send me downtown. See, people didn't have credit cards, they had credit. And you would go, my mother would send me downtown to Dr. Campbell's drugstore. Said, go tell Dr. Campbell to fix me a dose of castor oil. She might have a cold bag, and he'd fix up these concoctions. And you had a little book. And I would sit there while Dr. Campbell was getting my mother's prescription. I would sit there in the comic book section to read the book. Well, I knew Dr. Campbell. I'm going to tell you something about this. I knew Dr. Campbell. And I would say, Dr. Campbell, my mama said I could have a strawberry shake. And he would say, you go around there and tell Alma to fix the shake, and you get it and come back. You couldn't go sit at the lunch counter, but Dr. Campbell was not mean to me. I got the strawberry shake. And every time she would send me down there and say, Mama say I could have this. This one particular day, I got the shake. Miss Alma Collins was working there. I got the shake. was sitting reading the comic books, went to get the prescription that Dr. Campbell had to put on my mama's book, because you go and you pay on it and they would pay their debt. It was like a handshake, it was an honorable system. And so Dr. Campbell came to me, he said, here's your shake. He said, but Irma didn't tell you you could have that shake. Now, the next time you come, you ask Dr. Campbell for a shake, and I'm not putting it on Irma's bill. Doc Campbell taught me a lesson. But here's what happened. Doc Campbell had a son, Maurice Campbell. Remember Maurice? My principal, Mr. B.A. Morse, lived on US 1. And right off US 1 on Factory, it was corner of Factory Street, I believe, in US 1.
The house still there.
It's still there. It used to be a law office.
Yeah, I think it's
But
still-
anyway, school, we were getting out of school. They used to do, this is strange, the white kids across town, around Peachtree and area, if you lived there, you did a rumble with the kids across US 1, downtown around the River Road. You would have, they would fight. But here you got black kids and Maurice and those white kids coming together because the section of town they lived on. Mr. Morse got wind of it. Mr. Morse came there, and there they were getting ready. They integrated themselves because the East was gonna fight against the West, gonna tear their butts up, and they had them black boys on that side of town. Maurice knew they had an army. And they were getting ready to do that fight, and Mr. Morse came along. And he says, Maurice Campbell, you boys go. And they went to his garage. They obeyed him. Mr. Morse got there, and he tore their butts up, and the black and the white. And you know what? He took Maurice and put in his car and took him to Doc Campbell. He says, now, I didn't give him a whooping. He says, good, because he's going to get another one. That's the way we were, because our mothers worked for women, white women, that were not cruel. That's the way we had to earn a living. They provided for our families. And there's a story in the Bible where this Lazarus wanted just the crumbs from a rich man's table. When our mothers worked them parties for those Jewish women and those white women, you should see the ham, Jews didn't do ham, but if you would see the food products that would come back home, they were sent to us. So it was a relationship under segregation. It was not cruel for us. When we integrated, it was like, okay, so we going in these places that we've been going in all the time, except we don't have to sit in the balcony anymore. And we used to integrate ourselves anyway downtown, because there was a white man downstairs. He was an usher to keep the white kids in line. And there was another man, Mr. Joe Dennis, upstairs to keep us in the balcony in line. But they would have an intermission. And that intermission, we all agreed. We black kids would go down there with the white kids, and the white kids would come up there, and when them lights went on and they saw us, boy, we were scattered like roaches. We integrated ourselves up there just to have fun. So when you talk about it, it wasn't a hard life. We had some incidents and stories under Jim Crow. And we're still talking about that cultural institution of the schools. So I'm like James, Cocoa wasn't bad. And we know clams was down there in Angel City, but it wasn't bad.
I had a personal experience with that, yeah. When we moved here from St. Augustine, we had left some relatives there, and they went through some terrible things in St. Augustine.
Ooh, yes, it was rough.
And my relatives there could not get any work anymore. And they called my dad and asked him, could he come down here, because he heard Cocoa wasn't as bad. And he came here, and Leroy Eubanks, daddy. And he came here to work, and what the dentist name that came?
Dr. Haley,
Dr. Haley.
Robert Haley.
Moved here from St. Augustine because integration wasn't as bad here. They never had the fights and the protests and stuff. And so they moved here because they couldn't find work to do there. And today, that name, Eubanks, is poison in St. Augustine.
They finally
To
accepted
some
Dr.
people,
Haley.
to some people, you know, because there was a white kid that was killed by someone, and they said it was one of the Eubankses doing the riots and stuff.
Yeah.
And the older people there are still carrying a grudge for Eubanks' name.
If you were to Google my name, Rosemary McGill, you're gonna see a picture with me I think I was 16 on that picture. And there's a little boy and Dr.
King.
Dr. King, Martin Luther King. This little boy wasn't supposed, this was in St. Augustine, Florida, where she's talking about. He wasn't supposed to be there because the people that participated in the movement and sit-ins were high school students and college students. You couldn't let those younger kids because the Klan was out there. And we were in that march, and Dr. King, they were telling the little boy, you can't march, because it was dangerous in St. Augustine. We met the Ku Klux Klan. Dr. Haling that she's talking about was a dentist, and the Klan caught him and another fellow. They were spying in on the Klan meeting, and they caught him. And a white gentleman saw what they were gonna lynch him. They beat him bad, and they ruined his hand, wanted to ruin his hands because he was a dentist. But the sheriff there had threatened to kill Dr. King. And this man, not Dr. King, Dr. Haley, this man went and got a sheriff, a state trooper it was, not a sheriff, a state trooper. He says they got 2 black guys and they're beating them. And that's when the state troopers got other state troopers and they came and rescued Dr. Haley, Robert Haley. That was, and when she talks about St. Augustine and what went there,
It was rough.
it was horrific. It was horrific.
It was so bad that Dr. King had his men down there working, and he couldn't make it there himself to demonstrate. But they told him they were leaving St. Augustine, they couldn't take it anymore.
He had been
And
jailed there.
So he came down, and he saw what was going on.
Ooh, it was
And he
bad.
went back to D.C. Johnson was president then. He went back to D.C. and pleaded with Johnson to pass the Civil Rights Act. And that was when it was passed,
If you go
because
to
of St. Augustine being so.
But what got Lyndon Baines Johnson, what opened his eyes, was those 4 little girls in Alabama that were bummed in that song.
Yeah.
And he thought, it was so inhumane. He could not imagine that human beings could have such inhumanity against other human beings. That's how Lyndon Baines signed that Civil Rights Act.
Back to St. Augustine, if you go there now, one of the tours that they offer, it goes right past and they point out
Yeah.
the house where Dr. Haley
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
right there. They go right point that house out.
And there's some
in-
good stories about St. Augustine
Oh, yeah.
too. Folk Mosey, I don't know if you've heard it.
Is it Lincolnville? Is
They came
call
from
that area
South Carolina
Lincolnville, too?
and to there because they found out, they heard that the Catholics, if you converted to Catholicism, they would let you stay. And that's what they did. They walked from there, South Carolina through Georgia, and some of them, they lost their life and everything, but they made it to that little area. And it's just on the tour now, Folk Mosey. And they made it there and they converted, and that's how they.
Do you guys know what the North Star is?
Yes, I do.
You really know what it is?
I mean, I'm sure you know a lot more, and I'm very happy to hear.
Well,
I
it's,
know the guiding light.
thank you. See, people are thinking that when we look up in the sky and see the North Star, but the North Star is a guide. The North Star to us was like the star in the east to the wise men. Follow that star, and it'll show you where the Messiah is, the Savior. So you're right. Okay, we're on the same page.
I wanted to ask,
So I just was mentioned back to Monroe. Some of the achievements that was thing that was achieved there was with the athletic department, especially when Dick Blake became the basketball coach after Johnson. he took the boys' basketball team. They won back-to-back state championships. And in addition to that, he took them to the national tournament. This was all the high schools, even during that time. They went to national tournaments up there. That was the first time that ever happened. Black school go to national tournaments. So that was another thing that was coming. Out of those came a lot of guys who went in the pro, in the college, and
That's incredible, and I definitely want to talk some more about sports. When you say that the national, like, is this a segregated high school sports league? Or
the national. Well, we had to.
I got some clothes.
All the black schools in the state, yeah, and then but the national was all the schools.
Oh, that's incredible.
That's the national. Yeah, but yeah, as a matter of fact, we used to hold our tournaments down at Fort Pierce. We used to have basketball tournaments down there. And back to that, even before they built the new school, down at the old school, we played our basketball on an outdoor basketball court.
Keep this for her.
It was on the basketball court,
before I will.
Asphalt court with string and lights. That's where we played basketball down there.
That was for your games?
Yes, our game. Until they built the new school in '54, then there was a gym down there. But it was just.
But let me tell you something about that, when he was talking about that back-to-back championship. See, Curbie knows those boys came up playing on dirt road under a street light. And that was all we had, because we didn't have recreation or gyms or places to play. So that's the way they played. When Dick Blake came along, he had a team of fellows that was street savvy when it came to playing sport. Those boys could dribble a watermelon and shoot three-pointers with it. They were just skilled athletes. And Dick came along as a coach, and he was gifted with this group of boys. They won back-to-back state championships. Now here we come. It's time to desegregate these schools. What was the over at Cocoa High School? I forget the principal at that time, and the other one was on school board. He and I didn't like each other. We were conflict.
Anderson?
Huh? No, I'll think of him in a minute. But anyway, it was time to integrate, so they start taking just a few teachers at a time. Now, here's something that they consider. Number one, Dick Blake had light skin and pretty hair. He had your kind of hair. And they were placing him because he was in sports and had won 2 back-to-back championships. So now they're getting a jewel. Let's get Dick Blake over here as one of the first teachers to desegregate. Dick went over there and those white kids loved him. Here's the point. Dick never got a championship out of when they integrated, because he didn't have them scrappy black boys. They were still over at Monroe waiting to be integrated. So we give credit to the coach, but it wasn't the coach. He was gifted with some scrappy boys that knew how to play that ball. And when we integrated, Dick Blake ain't got a championship yet.
Now, he was after Dave Johnson became.
Bob Anderson. Oh, that's what it hit me. Bob Anderson.
Well, after Dave Johnson, Dick Blake became the coach. So he was my high school basketball coach and baseball coach. Dick Blake was. Yeah. And so the championship, the state championship came after I left, but that was in the 60s, early 60s. So Even
67 and
65, 65,
66 and 67.
something like that, yeah. So they would go.
I had wanted to ask, like in the local before like the state championships, what schools did you play against for like baseball and basketball and football?
Gibson High,
All
Humboldt High,
South,
all black school, Jones High.
Guilford, as far south as Guilford,
Stone.
Stone
yeah,
High School.
Yeah.
Stone High School.
We were in what you call a district, and you played in that district, and the schools that was in your district. Hungerford High was one,
Hungerford
Jones
High
High
I
was
wanted to
one,
ask about
yeah.
Hungerford.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we played Hungerford High School, yeah.
Did you have any long-term rivals?
Oh,
Stone
yeah.
High.
Stone
Let me tell you about
and Guilford.
Let me tell you about Stone.
Oh, yeah.
Stone and Monroe were rivals,
Oh, yeah.
ardent rivals. I mean, the kind that draw blood and drew guns. When the community we would have something, Stone whole community came to Cocoa because we had a group of street folk that wanted to fight. I mean, they took the game serious. But Monroe was in a tournament. Stone had been eliminated out of the tournament. But now Monroe was top seed and had to play, was it Hungerford? It was Hungerford. They had to play Hungerford. So now Brevard County, meaning Stone and meaning Titusville, Gibson High, was over there. So now it's the county. You're forgetting about your rival, your county. And them people started fighting over there at Hungerford. And when they did, Brevard County, which was Stone, Monroe High, and Gibson High, people from the community, it was dangerous. They would draw guns. But Stone was fighting with Monroe. And we were ardent enemies when we came back to Brevard County.
Mm-hmm.
What sport was that game?
Football.
That was for football? That's fantastic.
Yeah, we played all sports, but that particular one was,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then I wanted to ask, because you mentioned that they were sports rivals, but was there like any like collaboration or sense of community and sharing around the
Oh, we were
schools?
very, very friendly community-wise. The only other thing that we fought against was, and the boys learned to use them little Molotov cocktails would come in, that was over the girls. If I dated a boy from Stone High School, the boys from Monroe High, they were gonna get them. And so you became rivals because who was dating the girls from that, whether it was from Melbourne or whether it was from Titusville was quiet. Titusville, they were very quiet. But Stone, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We've touched on this a little bit, but you mentioned home ec and you mentioned we've talked about the future farm workers of America. But I wanted to hear more about the homemakers and the clubs and classes that were specifically for women.
Here's what we learned under home economics. And we were organized into a group called New Homemakers of America. It was an organization statewide, we would participate. And in that, they taught us, of course, how to sew. You learn how to sew. You learn how to cook, how to measure, how to prepare a meal. But we had to learn also etiquette. What foods were finger foods? When did you, in other words, if you had pieces of celery or raw pieces of carrot, did you eat it with the finger? Did you pick up a fork? And when you had a piece of chicken on the plate, did you use your fingers to eat it, or was it proper to cut it with a knife? And so those were the things, but they also taught us home care, nursing. So a lot of those girls that went to Florida A&M to enter into the School of Nursing, we just had one, Ida Price. She graduated from Florida A&M from the nursing school. Well, when you get into nursing, what they taught us, we would go in the community and elderly people that were bedridden, and we would go and they would teach us how to bathe them, how to change a diaper, how to roll them over, and while they were still in that bed, how to properly put clean sheets on there and make the bed. Because our education only led us to being a teacher. So we learned basic, this is why they were called, some of the schools were called vocational schools, Melbourne had one. You went to a vocational school and you learned the vocations. And so that's what we were taught with the New Homemakers of America, teaching us not just how to clean a house or to decorate or how to even, we learned what they call it, feng shui, whatever it is called. We didn't know what it was back then, but they were telling us how you never place a mirror on a wall that's reflecting a bad, because whatever it's facing is going, so it distorts the whole room in your decor. Or how not to use certain colors. And back when we were growing up, you didn't use polka dot and plaids together. Now, the code is you can put it all together and it comes out right. So that's what the New Homemakers of America taught us.
Did you learn canning at all?
Oh, absolutely. We learned all of that.
If you said new homemakers and you took the new farmers, nationwide, before then it was called future, but they wanted to distinguish between the white and the black. So we became the new farmers of America, or new homemakers of America.
Was there any 4-H club at all?
No, I don't. That came later after us. We couldn't enjoy 4-H and Boy Scout and Girl Scouts and Little Brownies and all that. We didn't have that opportunity. Do you know right where we're sitting here, right across the street here, is the water tower, and right on that land, at where the water tower is, was a recreation center called Tiger Den.
Yes.
It was for the white children. Cocoa High were called Tigers. And that was where they went for recreation. We couldn't enjoy that. We went to desegregated, but rather we came out better. They gave us Jolie Smith Center with a pool.
That's fantastic. And so we talked a little bit about the farming and how the new homemakers and the new farmers prepared to run a farm and home. Do you feel it was preparing you to run farms as businesses, or was this more for like truck gardening and maintaining?
It was probably for all that, because a lot of kids, we didn't have money to go to college, and the boys went on athletic scholarship. Girls didn't, but not all boys was athletes. So they had, after high school, they had to have a job. Well, what was the industry? It was citrus and cattle. Or you went to work as a chauffeur or a gardener. You didn't go to college, so you finished high school, but you had to work in what the culture was. And our culture was agriculture and right, citrus. Cattle. That's what we were. Doodle was what, and we worked agriculture. They had old Gladiola farms.
Oh yeah.
We worked together Gladiola farms, and which is, let me tell you where it was, is Vieira.
Down Vieira.
This is why right now Vieira is in a flood zone. Because if you look at US 1, Duda owned US 1. Eisenhower came along and said, let's do the interstate. But here you got, it's sitting up like this, and down here, when you travel on US I-95 and get into Vieira, you're up, and Vieira's sitting down. It's in a flood zone because that was cattle land and Gladiola farm. And so now Duda sold that property and continued with the property over in Orange County and sold that to Disney. And so we don't have cattle as much as we did back then. It has changed. And citrus is not the same, because these fellows, when they get out of school, they go to the orange grove and pick oranges. That was what you did. Or attend the trees, whatever was necessary. So you did according to what was available in our culture.
And then I wanted to ask if we're home, so citrus and cattle is important. Were home gardens common or popular among the Black community at this time?
Ooh, yeah. Everybody had, let me tell you, everybody had a garden. Everybody had some collard greens. And some folk had some sugar cane. You remember the lady, You all remember right there on, coming down from the school, from where Harry T. Moore Center is, there was a lady, Miss Jessup. She had a mule. Y'all remember Curbie, you got her. She had a mule right across from where Whitfield's store is, across the ditch bank, on that corner,
Mandarin Street.
on Mandarin Street, right on the corner. Next to him was the Kimbrough. She had a mule, and she would get on her mule, and then across the river, we had a little wood bridge. We didn't have the Hubert Humphrey. We had that little wood plank bridge. Mr. Sawyer would take his goods with his mule and wagon and come and sell his produce. Everybody had gardens. We ate out of the garden. Had chickens. You gathered the eggs. We ate good.
That's fantastic. Was it like people of all genders that maintained the gardens, or was it like primarily women or men?
Oh, women,
It
everybody.
was more men than women, but
Yeah.
women did all of the women's work.
Yeah, they did
Inside
the house.
Yeah.
Let me tell you,
Yeah.
woman, you don't mess with her garden now. At certain
Yeah,
times,
yeah.
places, you don't mess with her garden.
And what would be the woman's?
But they did what they had to do, you know, the man or the woman, whatever they had to do, they did.
That's fantastic. And I guess I'm a little curious, what was women's work in regards to the gardening and agriculture and the home?
Women didn't work citrus. Women worked in the homes of white folk.
Yeah.
You maintained her house. You ironed, some women ironed clothes. That was their craft. White women would bring baskets of clothes to her, and she would sit in her house and she would iron clothes. Because people didn't go to laundries, I mean like dry cleaners.
Oh, no.
And so, but black women would, and they had certain days. Basically, it was Tuesdays and Wednesdays, because Mondays was wash day. And then Tuesdays and Wednesdays, the white folk would bring them, and she'd stand or she'd sit and she'd iron those clothes, and they would pick them up.
After they washed them.
Yeah.
And just for clarity, I wanted to ask, is the field you mentioned that was out by Clear Lake, is that different from the garden that you were talking about? Or was that the garden that supplied the school? For the,
Oh, the one that the ag department had, that was different.
okay, so there was a garden on school property?
No, not.
There was a garden, about, about 50 yards from the school property. After there was, near Johnson Street. Yeah, that was, now I didn't remember the one now.
That was early on. They had one off of Clear Lake.
Off Clear Lake?
Down on Lake Drive there, down in there.
Okay.
On the left
Yeah, I
hand side
didn't
there.
remember that.
Yeah, they had one down there.
Okay.
And that was for the schools.
Oh, okay, so there was two separate ones?
Yeah. Most of them, just, the other one that you're talking about is the individuals gardening.
So
Everybody had a garden. Everybody had a patch of collard green.
that's fantastic.
You know, and speaking of that, and I give, I don't understand it today. There were 10 in our family, you know, but we never went hungry,
Sure enough.
never went without clothes, you know. My father worked in the citrus grove. My mother was basically a domestic worker. She didn't do too much of that because she had too many kids to take care of at home. But they did it,
Still domestic
never
at home.
complained, you know, and I asked myself today, how in the devil could they survive feeding 10 kids, 10 kids, off of a little bit of money that my dad made?
Yeah.
You know, but they did it. So I respect the heck out of it.
And you know, in our culture, all three of us can attest. A sound was important to us. Every evening in our community at 5 o'clock, you would hear the downtown 5 o'clock chime.
Sure.
My daddy would always say, when you hear the 5 o'clock chimes, let every rat find his hole, because you go home and eat. See, we ate together. 5 o'clock in just about every household in this community. We were all in the house sitting down with our hands folded and our heads bowed saying grace, and we ate together. Once we finished eating, The girls would go in there and wash dishes, and boys too. They would take turns. One gonna wash, another one gonna dry. The kitchen got cleaned up. Food got put away if there was anything left over. Every day at 12 o'clock, we didn't have to look at a clock because we heard the 12 o'clock whistle with the fire department. Every day at 12. Every morning at 5:30, the old Florida East Coast Rail, number 67, would come down and my dad would say, yep, she's on time, and he would head to Patrick Air Force Base. We listened to things. Women would sit in the afternoon on their porches, and you could hear the chimes all the way to Merritt Island. Everybody knew it got quiet in black homes and white homes. We listened, and at 12 o'clock, the men that were working the railroad, working duty, or working the Orange Grove, knocked off for lunch. Because they heard that fire whistle, and everybody got up. They know we up on time, because the 6:57, you hear it. That was part of our culture. Things like a train coming down, or the fire. Now when the fire department go now, you know he's going to a fire, so somebody's sick somewhere. But that's the way it was with us. We walked down to the river, Indian River. In the black community, there was probably about 5 churches. And nobody had a pool, baptismal pool inside the church. We went down, and the whole community went down to the river, down the old Indian River by the Indian River Hotel. And those white people would sit on their porches, waiting and listening because we were singing. And the sounds of the song, take me to the waters to be baptized. And so that was the way our culture was, with sound, with smells, with events, getting baptized, even little things that we did in school like plaiting the maypole, Halloween carnivals, sock hops. Those were the things that was part of our culture and our upbringing. That's what the 3 of us can tell our children and telling our stories, even under Jim Crow segregation. But boy, the part that makes me happy is the fact that I can look in the face of 2 white males and a black male listening to our story.
I remember my first grade teacher, Miss Emma McGee.
Mm-hmm. And she was only certified. She was only certified, but then when they got to the school district with the board of regents, say these women got to get a degree. So they went to Bethune-Cookman College, and they went to Florida Normal, and they got the degree that was required because they had what was called a normal degree. And so Miss Emma McGee didn't go, but Miss McGee, Miss McCaster, her sister went. Remember Miss Irene Whitfield? She was one of our teachers.
Girls with caps.
Yeah, that's right.
That was my first grade teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Caps.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and there's actually a lot I want to touch on, and we probably won't be able to, but I wanted to make sure I address this specifically. I wanted to ask what any of your involvements in the civil rights movement was during high school.
I was the involved person. That's why I say if you Google my name, I'm all over the.
So I wanted to ask.
In 1959, I was a member of the Greater St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church, and the minister was Reverend Bradley, an elderly man. Well, he left, retired from the ministry, and a young man came along by the name of W.O. Wells. He married a girl that came here, Reverend Parker, they raised Mrs. Wells, Annie Ruth Wells. She was a member of Monroe High School, a graduate. And they came here and took over that ministry for Greater St. Paul. 1955, I believe it was the murder of Emmett Till. Emmett Till and I are only about 3 years apart. I think he's 3 years older than me. And that was right at the point where the world, when we saw Emmett Till, now here I am, just a little girl still, didn't know nothing about no civil rights. But what happened one evening, Pastor Wells took over that ministry, and one evening, a lady at a store called the Old Georgia store, a white proprietor had that store, and he said the woman had stole something. She may have, but she didn't have it on her. She must have put it back. But an entanglement ensued, and he hit her. When he hit her, word got out through the community to Pastor Wells that this woman down there, the police had gotten her, and the white man had hit her. Remember when I say we did things by sound? Church bell would ring. And when the church bell would toll, it told two things. Someone was dead, or we need you to come to a meeting. The old deacons there got the other deacons in the other churches and say, we need to meet with Pastor Wells. I think at that time I must have been probably, 11 years old when that happened. In 55, I must have been about 11 years old. And that was where it ensued for me. Pastor Wells drew together from our little church group, little Bible classes, BTUs, a youth group. Because our parents could not go out there. They were working for white folk. You can't go picketing Doc Campbell. My mama had an account with him. He gave me strawberry milkshakes. And you couldn't go against the people you were working for. So he formed this youth group. And it was through the NAACP that we started the civil rights movement, through Pastor W. Wells. We continued with it in boycotting, picketing, boycotting, and picketing. You were at Saturday's event with Monroe. The young man that spoke, he was one of the young men that was in our youth group. And we would go downtown and picket the theater, and go downtown and picket Doc Campbell. We would go to Woolworth. We didn't want a hot dog and a Coke. We had hot dogs and Cokes at home. But we went there because we had to stand against segregation. That's where I got started as a young girl. I continued, and I was reared an only child. So my father, which was my adopted father, was military and military oriented. And I remember I had to be in the band. I had to do things. I had to be involved. And we used to go downtown to parades, to do the parades. Oh, they loved seeing, back then we weren't black, we were colored. And they wanted to see that little colored band. So we'd go down there, Martin, the same people we were boycotting and picking again, but they wanted us in that parade. And so now I'm conscious behind Emmett Till and behind segregation and what I'm being taught by Pastor Wells. Now I'm wondering, why, and I asked my dad, why they got to always put us in, we were always in the back. I said, why they got to always put us in the back of the parade? And I never will forget my dad saying this, Cookie, that was my nickname, because they saved the best for last. Don't worry about where you are, you continue to move forward. Here was the beauty of it. We would go down Brevard Avenue, where we had been boycotting and picketing, in a parade. White people just clapping for that little colored band. They wanted to see that little colored band. Oh, we went down that plane, Plurals Unum, William Tell's Overture, 76 trombone, and oh, they loved the little colored band. But by the time we came downtown, see, US 1, oh, I'm coming. US 1 was the dividing line between the white community and the black community. We were called across the pond, and I'll tell you about that. But here we coming down, when we get across US 1, now we in the black community. There was a bar called the Central Bar. There was a pool room. There was Elliott Mills Cab Company and Little Cafe. That was the Paris Inn. And all of the people from the black community heard us coming. Well, we wasn't playing 76 trombones anymore. We came playing Peter Gunn and Night Train. Oh, we were kicking up some dust and showing our butts. We would shake our butts and they liked it. Little boy, I saw him at the reunion, Gerald. He was a little fella that would come along. His sister was in the band. She was a majorette. And I was a majorette at that time. But he'd come along by me. He'd run the whole parade. Rosemary, Rosemary. And no, not Gerald Adderley. This was the Collins, Barbara Collins' brother. But we would come. Now here we are, coming down Magnolia Street, which is now Stone Street. All those white folk that were downtown on flatbed trucks, lawn chairs, right along that way Mr. Blake and them house is, coming around that corner there for the school when we getting ready to go down to Avocado, sitting there waiting, because they knew that little colored band gonna show out when they get across the pond. Now, across the pond was when you get to US 1, where Rose Carbonic is, across the railroad track was a pond. Sullivan owned that land, but Duda had some cattle and a bull that they put in there for breeding. And you couldn't get from US 1, from where they were, to right where we lived in the community, which started Paw Paw Street in South Wilson. You couldn't get there. You had to go all the way around Stone Street, coming up Blake, and then you in the community. So the locals took cross tires from the railroad that was just laying there and built a little bridge across that retention pond. And that's why it was called Across the Pond. Well, white folk followed us all the way from Blake, Avocado to Rosalie Jones in lawn chairs, because we were kicking up some dust. We learned to appreciate certain things in a segregated society, and yet we were together. Isn't that strange? All we had to do was change the law. Now, that's where it's integrated. So we knew the people. Let me tell you what happened. We were downtown in front of Doc Campbell's and the old theater, boycotting, picketing. A white lady came and handed me a check. Very discreetly, take this to your minister. When we got back, I went to Pastor Wells. I said, Brother Wells, this lady told me to give you this check. Had a check there for $80 to support us. There were people who our mothers and our fathers worked for, supported us, but couldn't come out. You just couldn't come out and say, yeah, let's. But what happened, there was a man called, remember the Chastain restaurant and the Maxwell House? They came together. Overnight, we integrated. Pastor Wells took me, it was me, James Speed, Barbara Reed Blackman, and Barbara Hill Chester. And Sylvester Weaver was our chaperone. Took us, we called the Freedom Train, and went into Washington, to the March on Washington. Sat there and listened at Dr. King deliver his famous I Have a Dream speech. That was where I was in civil rights. This lady, Miss Alma Collins, we can't figure this out, and a white gentleman asked me the same thing. Miss Collins was white, but she married a black man. That was a no-no, but they lived comfortably in this community. Miss Collins told my mother, because I was very active, very active. Miss Collins told my mother, Irma, you need to tell Cookie that she need to slow down. This is what the lady said, because them crackers gonna kill her. My mama said, you can't stop her, Alma, let her go. And that's where and overnight we integrated.
You mentioned Sylvester Weaver, Wasn't that the plaintiff in the integration
Absolutely,
lawsuit?
absolutely, absolutely. And there was another, and I went to the law library. We are in the Florida statute. Sandra Luesta Wade versus the city of Cocoa. She was one of our youth group members that was picketing. There's a law. And when I learned about that law, I was at Bethune-Cookman College, and there was an attorney there that I went to because he remembered me from St. Augustine. And I went to him and we were talking. He says, I want you to come by, I want to show you something. And he showed me the statute in the law books. Oh, it's probably been about 15, 16 years. I went to the law library and the lady in there helped me find that statute. Sandra does not know that she is written in law.
Incredible. So there was a boycotting, picketing, and the lawsuits.
Oh, we had fun doing it.
Was there any other organizing or strategies used in Cocoa at the time?
No, like I say, Cocoa was, we integrated overnight quietly. We had one incident. It was over on Merritt Island where Wendy's was a place called the Golden Point. It was a hamburger place called the Golden Point. And we were going over there to demonstrate. People, now that was some Klan territory in Angel City. So word got out that the Klan is going to be there. See, it used to be a time the Klan could go through a community and scare people to death. We was just a different breed. So we knew all Galley was Ku Klux Klan territory, but never did we see Klan members. We didn't see men and horses and white sheep. We weren't afraid. And so when we went to the Golden Point, there was a group of street fellas that heard that the kids are going and we're going to protect them. And we went over there and there we were confronted, but boy, they came out like, that black community came out like Indians on a reservation. They were ready, let me tell you, and white folk thinned out and nobody caused us any harm.
That's fantastic. Now, this is much later than what we've been talking about, but I did see that there was like a protest at the Poinsett Middle School in 1976 when it was integrated. And the newspaper didn't really give a lot of context, so I was wondering if you
I was in
remember.
there.
Would you please tell me more about that? I was very curious.
What was happening, this was during the era when they were talking about busing. Poinsett was a little black elementary school. And in order to integrate, they didn't want the white kids to be integrated into that community. And they were gonna take what the school board was gonna do. There go Bob Anderson again, that's when he and I became ardent enemies. They were gonna take our children and bus them as far as Merritt Island and Cocoa Beach. You got small children on a bus, you're taking them out of their community because you don't wanna get back at us and send your white kids over there. Oh, it was ruckus because Poinsett, which is now Rosalie Jones, had 4 apartment buildings and they called it Vietnam. And you had a lot of people. It wasn't bad as they said it was, but they made it like that. So now while we're integrating, you start getting some rumbling from, not from the organization, but from some gang bangers in the community. And so they put a mark on us. So they didn't want their white children coming into that environment. They knew, this is why Monroe High School closed down. Our schools was inferior. They built them that way. You're gonna take these white kids out of their good schools and send them into inferior schools, so what they were gonna do was the busing. All over the United States, they was talking about busing. And it would take, our kids would come home, it would be dark. So we fought against the closing of that school. They really wanted to shut it down. That's why Sylvester Weaver came in. I was one of the spokesmen that stood before the school board, and they didn't want to hear us. They said that we'll take it under advisement. And they went on to other business until I stood and said, we're not leaving. And we had people outside picketing, we're not leaving until you render us a decision. Here's what we have. Ralph Williams, who was then working with the school board. Ralph Williams was what we called the spook that sat beside the door. They thought I was highly intelligent, wondering where this black woman is coming from. It was coming from Ralph Williams, who was feeding us all of the information that the school board was discussing. So when we went back to the meeting, we were prepared, and they were in awe as high in the devil. They knew that. That was because we were getting the information. He couldn't do it. He was a part of this establishment. We understood, but they were giving us the information. And Sylvester Weaver, the people, there was Sylvester Weaver, McIvory, Mary Pearl Ivory's husband, McIvory, myself, Pastor Wells, Bess Donaldson. That was about it. I was the only female in there. But that's where that, and so Sylvester Weaver is when we continued in that action, he became the one, the plaintiff. And he's the one that we used to get that school desegregated. Now, once it was desegregated, our children my daughter went to every elementary school in Rockledge, but she didn't cross that bridge, and she didn't go to Cocoa Beach.
That's fantastic. And you just brought up busing as a very contentious policy for integration in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But earlier you had mentioned some of you had mentioned how the bus route that supplied Monroe was incredibly long, and that black students had the very long busing. Was there any noticeable difference between the way they used the busing practices before and after integration?
Yeah, because we were a community. See, under segregation, we were just a community. Where he lived was called Bonaventure.
No, I lived in Rockledge.
Rockledge
was the next.
Further. It came further. But where he lived, probably wasn't anybody other black students down there past that point, but you all right. But all of them had to come to the one schools, Monroe. Yeah. So now you got kids, black kids living on Merritt Island, black kids living in South Rockledge where Jim and those live. Yeah. You got City Point up there. Sure. So how these kids gonna get to school? They can't walk. You got all these different sanctuaries, more or less, where they're coming from. So you got this one bus driver. He's making his routes to all of them, and that's why it was long. That's why it was long. But it would have been worse when the school board came up with their busing system, because our children would have been going to Merritt Island, to Cocoa Beach, around Satellite Beach, and coming back up. That didn't make sense.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
What else was that? I know we've been speaking for a long time, so I guess just to kind of, I'd love to speak at a later time. There's just lots to talk about, but just to think about closing, I wanted to ask y'all what you've done to preserve the history of Monroe, because this isn't the first thing. There's obviously been a lot of work done to maintain and preserve this history, so I wanted to preserve and record the efforts you put this in.
One of the things that I can appreciate too is after I retired from the city of Cocoa, I was asked by Dr. Jolie Smith, and what was the president of the college at the time, to take on the program. I was president of the Monroe High School Alumni, and we did a good work. And Dr. Smith asked me to come to the college. He says, "We need your talent, Rosemary. You can work in the more multicultural center." That's how I got to go around talking to the white kids on our different campuses and telling our stories. And so when we went there, the idea in the more multicultural center was to establish the 3 historical black schools in Brevard County: Gibson, Monroe, and Stone. So Jimbo was on our board. We had him. You remember, you all came out. We had people from Stone. We got them. We got people from Gibson High. Got them, and we formed a board. And during that, I was able to collect memorabilia doing a lot of research, and I guess having been in Monroe school system all those years, I knew who was where. So now here I am on the college campus, and I'm looking, and I says, they had a pile of pictures and things on the floor. And I looked and I said, that picture over there, what y'all doing with it? She said, well, it's going into archives. I said, no, I want it. That was the principal that gave me my diploma. So we got his picture. Then there was another one of George Washington Carver. Our junior college was Carver College. I asked for that picture, I got it. There was another picture there, and it was of Ralph Williams, because they had named the student center after Ralph Williams. So I got those pictures, so I started coming up with stuff that the college was just discarding. And I said it was sitting there for a purpose. I asked for it and I got it. But then we went throughout the community. The newspaper contacted us about our history. So we started going, Mrs. Johnson, Dr. Johnson had stuff. I started getting stuff from our books here. And we created a museum. My B-flat clarinet is in that case.
Yeah, it is.
The pictures, our book here is in that case. When you go over to Emma Jewel's and look in the back, there's 2 cases. David came to me when I left the college. I bought that stuff with me. I said, they're not, because they're gonna archive it. And so David came to me one day and he said, Rose, he said, I got this money. He had contacted Irvin Grant and several of you all, got this money. We want to do a trophy case and we want to find it. I got the memorabilia. I just got it stored up in my daughter's garage. When you go to Emma Jewel's, that room we were in, the memorabilia in the back is what I donated to her. Every piece of it.
But I tell you, thank God for that. They had basically lost all of the records and stuff we had as a school.
It got burned.
It got burned.
I got mine, but it's burnt, but I got it.
Yeah. So hats off to Rosemary for the history we got. But you know, that occasion, to get to your point, that occasion that we had a couple of weeks ago, you know, all of us, the last class was 68, we're getting old, you know, and our time is much shorter. So if we're gonna have someone to continue this legacy, we gotta depend on the young folks. And that thing that they put together at Emma Jewell a couple of weeks ago, that is the type of stuff that we still need and that we need to encourage, because it's gonna take the young folks to keep it going, you know. If it hadn't been for a few of us, and especially David Jenkins and people like Rosemary, you know, after us, nothing left. I mean, what's still left? So and amazingly so many of those young folks, they have no idea of what the history is.
Well, see, we cheated them. We didn't tell the story.
We didn't tell the story.
We lived the story, but we didn't tell them the story.
Good point. Yeah.
So my granddaughter that just left out of here, my daughter, they used to say, oh, his Nana tell us something about civil rights, or tell us something about Monroe High School. You have to, and I found out oral stories are heard different than a story that's in a book. That's why I say they can forget. They don't want to teach critical race theory. These kids gonna learn it. I saw it with my own eyes in the different campuses that I went on with white students. This is why I was able to say, gosh, I've got Jim Crow's grandchildren calling my name, hugging me. This little white girl, Miss McGill, will you marry me? I love you. Do you know what that meant to me coming out of that history? We have to, and then to hear white kids say, we never heard a story like that. They've been in Brevard County, born here, most of them, and had not fully heard the story of Harry T. Moore. didn't know about segregation in Monroe High School and Stone High and Gibson until I told that story.
And you talked about the legacy. I said, there are a lot of kids who did not graduate from Monroe, but they went to the school and they innovated before they graduated. So there's a disconnect right there.
Yeah,
The
that's
kids who
right.
went to school but
That's
didn't
right.
graduate.
Mhm.
They graduated from Cocoa High, Rockledge High, wherever.
The president of the Alumni is one of those students.
Yeah.
The Thomas.
Or Live
Yeah,
Oak.
see, they came on the end.
Yeah.
The school closed in 1968. They were just coming from Poinsett over there, so they were only at Monroe 20 minutes before it was shut down because they graduated. They had to send those kids over to Cocoa High, and that's where their legacy is, at Cocoa High. So you coming out of Poinsett over to Monroe, you're only there for a few months before there's a lock on the door. So you're over at another school in an integrated system, and you don't know nothing about Monroe. Because when they locked the door, we didn't tell the story anymore.
Yeah.
That's where you guys come in, and that's why I appreciate the time that you all are taking. Yeah.
I don't want to delay us too much, but you mentioned the Moors, and I wanted to ask if the memory of the Moors assassination was well remembered and common in the Cocoa community, like immediately after the death.
Immediately after, but it should have lasted longer. But see, your culture changed. You're no longer fighting or living under segregation. You're fighting now under integration. And so in the mix, we knew it, but the relevance of it wasn't as strong. It became later in life, I guess around this was in 51 when the man was assassinated, December, Christmas night. And so now, I was a little first grader in North Carolina, in Emmerdine. I came here in 52 when he was already assassinated. But you could hear people talking because we had little newspapers. And the one we had was called the Pittsburgh Courier. And so and Jet Magazine and Evidence, that's how we got information. Because you didn't get it on radio and television. That was null and void. So that's how we got, but after not only that, there was another story that I know, I've told my children, but I don't know if you all have told your children about Ruby McCullough. This was a black woman who over in, my mind get ahead of my tongue. I think of it in Live Oak, Florida. Leroy Collins, who had been elected as a senator of the state of Florida, was a doctor over in Live Oak. She had a child. Now this woman was educated and wealthy, but they were in Bolita. You know what Bolita is? Bolita is Cuba gambling, illegal gambling. Yeah, that's okay. And so she prospered. This white doctor who had been elected, Leroy Collins, you look up that name and you'll see how it connects with us. And when she got pregnant for him, she was married, had a pretty girl. The husband knew it wasn't his, but it was a system of life with that parable rights thing. That white man could go there and take your wife and you just turn your head as if it didn't exist. And he was tied up with them with the Bolita, Cuba gambling. It was like mafia stuff. He let her know she got pregnant a second time and she was gonna abort the child. And he told her, you don't kill my seed. They got into an argument. It was on a Sunday morning. She walked that into the office because he was in the office that day and blew his brains out. Ruby McCullough. Dick Blake dated a girl, Frances, and Frances and Ruby McCullough's daughter were roommates at Florida A&M. Look up that story, Ruby McCullough. So these were two things that was happening, three things that was happening. There was Emmett Till, there was Harry T. Moore, And then there was Reuben McCullough and all that we were getting through Pittsburgh Courier and Ebony Magazine. So we were focused on that. That's really was the beginning of the storytelling of civil rights for us. And it really started with Harry T. Moore.
Thank you so much. And then just to end, I just wanted to ask if there was anything else you wanted to tell future generations about why you wanted to preserve this story or what you want them to know about Monroe.
See, you don't know, how can I tell you I'm going back to China and I've never been there? You can't go back to a place you haven't been. I can't say I'm going back to Africa because I've never been there, but I'm a descendant of it. So someone has to tell me who I am through the stories, through my ancestors. How did it come to be this? Why is it this way? Why are we so disliked? What is it with this melanin in our skin? What causes this? Now, through integration, I don't ask that question anymore because I see the melanin in my skin is what my white counterparts are baking in the sun to get. I was gifted with it. I look at white women who said my nose was flat and my lips was thick, and they're getting injections in their lips. And I'm saying, what's wrong with this? Something's not right with this. So you have to go back to history. I always say, it may not be a pretty picture, and it may not have a happy ending, but it's like a story. A book has a beginning, a climax, and an end. You start out reading the book, and it carries you to the climax. You can't leave it there. The person want to know what happened. Then comes the end, and you've read a good book. It may be number one on its list. So this is the way we are. Every nation under the sun need to know who they are. How did I get here? What caused this? Why do my skin has melanin in it and his doesn't? Why is, and even amongst us is black. Our hair is different grades and textures. So, but you have to know who you are and be proud of that. It's a big world. It wasn't made for me. It was made for me and you. And so this is why we have to tell stories.
Thank you so much.
And we appreciate stuff like this that you guys are doing.
Absolutely.
It really, really is important.
Because when we're gone, y'all going to be telling somebody on YouTube or hear our story.
I'm just very glad we'll know what how you felt and like how you wanted this story to be told. It's help
We
us do
tell it
justice
with
to
pride, we tell it with dignity, we tell it with salty tears, we get choked up. She couldn't handle it. Reminiscing back in that, it gets rough. But it's refreshing. You have to let it out. You have to let it out. Because like you say, Curbie, myself, in February, I'm gonna be 80. James is already 80, and Curbie had told me to tell his age, but I know how old he is.
83.
One thing about Monroe, if you ever spent one day at Monroe, you can't lie about your age. You 70 plus.
That's right.
And 80s.
That's right. That's right. And we know that the day will come that we won't be here, but you will remember sitting at this table. You'll remember recording it. We'll be sleeping in our grave. We'll be gone. We will have told the story.
You know, and you can learn something. I learned something today. Me, Rose, and Mildred, she was classmates. But when you asked me how hard was it coming up, we didn't have many problems, Mm-hmm. My classmate there, I can understand how she feels. She was in St. Augustine. I know about the issues in St. Augustine.
She's
So, I
still
mean,
shell shocked.
Yeah, I mean, that is real.
Okay. One
Yeah.
incident, when we were in St. Augustine, we were coming from, we had been at the old slave block. That's where we went to do our demonstration. Coming down, that picture of me, you see it on that was on a street called King Street. We were coming down that street. Now, not on that particular day in the picture, but we had been there several times picketing. And we were, protesting rather, and we were coming down the street. There was a lady, it was a store on this side of the street, and a lady was standing there. She had a baby, looked like it might have been a year-old toddler or something. And then there was a little girl and a little boy. The little boy looked like he was about 9 years old. She was standing, and across the street was a fish market. She wanted to get from her side across the street so she could get to the fish market before all of the boycotters and picketers came, because it was a large group of us. The Ku Klux Klan was on flatbed trucks with their rifles. They wanted to agitate us. We were told, do not, even if they hit you, do not hit back. We were taught how to, cradle our bodies and protect ourselves. We were taught when we were when you see them on those lines where you see them firemen using those water hoses, the PSI from that hose, full blast, will rip the skin off you. Here's what they were supposed to do. We were told, get to a wall, hold yourself together. They were to ruin the boys in their private parts with that hose, and they were to damage us. We couldn't breastfeed if we ever had children. That's what the hose was for, and they use hose and dogs to intimidate us. So we're coming down King Street. This lady wanted to cross. Just as she was getting ready to cross, the Ku Klux Klan was on flatbed trucks. Here they come with their rifles. And these two took the rifle, knocked the lady down with the baby, and hit the little boy in the head. That was to rile us up to start rioting. That way we could be arrested. We had to take that. She saw some of this stuff. I worked for Dr. Halen. He left St. Augustine and came up here to work, trained me to be his dental assistant. So she's shell-shocked from it. Horror, it's like these kids in war zone. It gets in your brain and it doesn't leave. And when you start to talk about it, just as I talked about my grandmother, who I never got to see, who we don't know whether they put her in a swamp and gators ate her up, or whether they buried her. We know somewhere in Mississippi soil is her bones. So when you talk about our history, not just on integrating schools and lunch counters, we got a lot, and it's hard. Now, I learned to cry mine out, but hers is, she's shell-shocked. She's getting some images because, folk, I'm telling you, Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama, St. Augustine. See, St. Augustine was our Birmingham. Stuff back then, once it get in your brain, it give you the shakes. And she just could not handle it. I mean, I know I know what she's going through from St. Augustine. So it's something. This is why I say again too, and James has just said thank you for the time that you all have taken just to listen to us, because it allowed us to not only tell you about our little school, but our history, our upbringing, our culture, the things that we suffered and the joys that we had. Because you notice anytime we talk about Monroe, all of us get a smile. Brag on our alma mater and our schools and our principals.
And talk about all the things that went through. They still had a sense of allegiance to the country.
Mm-hmm.
When the war started, they volunteered to go. Even those who did not,
Sure did.
they volunteered to go serve this country who was treating us the way they were.
That's right.
So they had a love and for the country, even in the midst of all of that. So,
I've been truly honored to be able to listen to hear the pride you feel for your school, and I mean, I'd heard of the Axe Handle riots in St. Augustine, but I had no idea how bad it was.
Oh, you can't imagine that.
Thank you so much. I think we've got a lot to work with. I know I've taken up a lot of your time.
Oh, we appreciate your
In the
time.
future, we might be able to talk about some more things, but I think we've got plenty for now. So
Good.
thank you so much for all
Well,
of this.
thank
you all.
you for
Thank you
having
all.
us.